Currently T-minus 21 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. Just a little over a minute away from the start of the big event here, as we do have additional confirmation from what we are seeing here on the screen. That payload, that propellant load, excuse me, is in fact underway according to SpaceX. We see here that from the venting. They also confirmed that Falcon 9 is healthy and that weather is currently go for launch, which is encouraging for liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket just a little over 21 minutes from now. Taking a look at the live chat here, I want to thank one of our channel members, Norman Reitzel, for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Norman. Good to see you this evening. Norman's comment makes a request for units in metric as opposed to the imperial system. It's like pounds. We do toggle back and forth between the two as we communicate with the audience based here in the States, which is more accustomed to hearing units in the imperial system as opposed to metrics. So try to be cognizant of both. And we do use both, although granted, not for everything all the time. And so try to be cognizant of that in the future as we are communicating with a global audience here. I want to make sure that everyone is fully understanding. We're now T-minus 19 minutes, 58 seconds and counting. You see the big vent now in motion. To track the rocket this evening and also provide some launch photography as well. Our Michael Caine has the evening off, been busy doing some eclipse photography this week. If you're not already following the fellas over on their social media, you can find them on X, formerly known as Twitter. Adam Bernstein, A Byrne NYC, Byrne with an E. Michael Caine is at MD Caine Jr. And be sure to follow Spaceflight Now on its social channels. We are at simply Spaceflight Now on X, Threads, Facebook, and of course, where you are right now, right here on YouTube. We'll also be joined this evening by our friend Pete Carsons with Max Key Productions in assistance in tracking the vehicle you see here at the heart of your screen. This is SpaceX's workhorse rocket, the Falcon 9, standing at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. We're less than an hour away from SpaceX's attempt to launch the Starlink Group 6-48 mission. This will be the 24th time they've launched a batch of Starlink satellites so far in the year 2024. We're T-minus 57 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. If you were with us earlier today, of course, we were using the L-minus countdown clock. We're back to the T-minus clock now because SpaceX uses a fueling system known as the load and go. Essentially, they'll be fueling practically to the point of launch. Whereas for ULA and its Delta rockets, it, I guess now we should say, did have a process in which the countdown included 2 planned 15-minute holds. It's the same with the Atlas V rocket. Before the Falcon 9 and the Falcon Heavy, there are no planned holds, and they fuel just up until about 2 minutes before liftoff. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time. This batch of 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites at 12:44 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. For our viewers joining us from around the world, that is 0444 UTC. Certainly appreciate the little more than 2,200 view that are joining us at the front end of our live launch coverage for this mission so far. If you haven't already, a great way to help us out is quick, easy, free to do so if you just hit the like button. Share the stream. It allows more folks to find our live coverage tonight and join us on in for
Te voy a heredar.
we are in a new day here on the East Coast. We're also powered by our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folk like Gavin Martin, Mel Roberts Harold, Sunny V, C.A. Gonza, Bradley James, Josh King, That Oval Guy, Callistia Lee, I Am Lita, Robert Strong Fox, and many others for your ongoing support. We could not do what we do without you, so thank you so much for being part of our community. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, where you can find things like embroidered mission patches, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, as well as the ability to watch all of our Cape-based live launch coverage in 4K. Last but not least, if you'd like to support the channel and you'd like to be a part of the conversation about this mission, or you have a question about something else upcoming that is relevant to the space industry or space flight, you could use the YouTube Super Chat feature right here in the live stream if you are with us watching live and not on the replay later on. If your comment or question is appropriate to be read in the show, we would love to bring you into the conversation. As you know, T-minus 53 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. Less than 20 minutes now from the point at which the launch director for SpaceX will give the go for the start of propellant load for today's SpaceX Starlink flight. I want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, Callistia Lee, for getting us off on good footing here by gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. So welcome to all of our newest channel members. Glad to have you with us. And if you would be so kind as to thank Callistia in the live chat if you haven't already. We hope you enjoy your time as channel members. And we hope you stick around. SpaceX is running the countdown for today's launch from its Hangar X site here at KSC. It's the facility where they refurbish Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights, as is the case with the booster you see here on your screen. It doesn't have quite as much character to it as some of the boosters we've seen recently. That's because this fella here, tail number 1083 in the SpaceX fleet, is flying for only the second time today. We'll talk about its previous first flight in just a little bit. SpaceX also has support, though, for this mission, in part from the control room at its headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, this morning's Falcon 9 flight is targeting liftoff at 12:44 a.m. Eastern, 0444 UTC. They do have multiple backup opportunities during tonight's launch window that lasts until 3:30 a.m. Eastern time. That is, assuming that they have not started fueling. Fortunately, the weather continues to hold well, as it did for this afternoon's finale of the Delta IV Heavy rocket program. Weather this morning also 90% favorable conditions for liftoff. The only watch item, once again, are those pesky cumulus clouds. If for whatever reason SpaceX is not able to launch tonight, the 24-hour backup window does fare just a bit worse. Weather drops to just 70% favorable, with both the liftoff winds and the cumulus cloud roll being potential concerns at launch. As far as the timing for that 24-hour backup opportunity, that window, should they need it, opens on Thursday, April 11th, starting at 12:18 a.m. Eastern, 0418 UTC. now T minus 49 minutes, 4 seconds and counting. A little more than 10 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director. Well, and just as I was about to apparently jump the gun, we do have a new T0 time for this morning's mission. Liftoff now stands at 1:16 a.m. Eastern. That is 05:16 UTC. We've now adjusted our countdown clock. The new the new countdown stands at T minus 1 hour, 20 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. So again, if you are just joining us here, expected to be a little further in the count, so were we. However, SpaceX has adjusted the T0 liftoff time of the Starlink 6-48 mission, currently targeting 1:16 a.m. Eastern, 05:16 UTC. Which means we are T minus 1 hour, 17 minutes and counting from that planned liftoff. And yes, to Chris Cotter in the live chat. This is another long day for Will and company, but that's just the way the ball bounces, I suppose. We're more than happy to be with you for the duration of the launch window until it launches or until it scrubs, and we'll and Callistia Lee, I will let you have at the coffee. It is far too close, hopefully, to going to sleep for some of us here to even think about caffeine at this hour. Taking a look back here at the live chat, want to welcome Jeff Murray joining us with channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Really appreciate that, Jeff. Welcome aboard and glad to have you with us. For those of you who were not with us for our live launch coverage of the final launch of the Delta IV Heavy rocket, though it was a bit cloudier than may have been perfectly ideal, it was still quite a sight to see that three-core rocket head up, lifting off from Space Launch Complex 37. It was my first time seeing it launch in the daylight here on Florida's Space Coast. So that was quite a treat for me personally, and certainly for all the folks that were able to catch a glimpse of it. You know, the clouds may have made that a bit tricky beyond those who were watching from the Cape side of things. It's on the channel as a standalone video in the not too distant future, but for those who are here with us now, go ahead and give you a look back at the launch of the final flight, 16th and final time that a Delta IV Heavy rocket lifted off for United Launch Alliance. This was supporting the NROL 70 mission, which we know from the National Reconnaissance Office that spacecraft was safely deployed earlier this evening. Let's take a look back at the launch itself. And that was a look back at the 16th and final launch of a Delta IV Heavy rocket. Appreciate the teamwork of the fellows on the ground here, combination of our friend Pete Carsons with Max Key Productions, or Adam Bernstein and Stephen Young stepping behind the camera to make those camera views possible. Mentioned channel membership comes with some perks, and we certainly appreciate those who support what we do here with channel membership. But those at the mission specialist level and higher will be publishing all of the camera views that you just saw in their entirety from today's launch as a separate video showing all the vantage points that we were looking at during the liftoff. That video will be coming to the channel within the next day or so. So be on the lookout for that. Again, that'll be available to channel members at the mission specialist level or higher. We appreciate you supporting us with channel membership. We're currently T minus 1 hour, 10 minutes, 45 seconds and counting to the new and hopefully current and final T0 liftoff opportunity, targeting 1:16 for launch of the Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40. That being said, as long as they have not started fueling, SpaceX does have a window that lasts until 3:30 a.m. Eastern. We will certainly keep our eyes and ears open for any further updates from SpaceX if they make any additional adjustments to the T0 liftoff time of this mission tonight. Mentioned at the start of the broadcast that our Michael Caine was out eclipse chasing over in Texas. Got some pretty stellar shots. A lot of people around the country across the path of totality were doing their level best to get some interesting views of the Umbra as it crossed America, starting in Mexico, moving through the lower 48 states, and then up into Canada. But some of the most unique vantage points of the eclipse that happened on Monday were the views that happened to be captured from space. We saw some video from the International Space Station. A couple satellites happened to capture this celestial event, and that included, fittingly, Starlink satellite. This camera view from Starlink in low Earth orbit, you could see the moon's shadow or the umbra. That's that big dot on the Earth's surface. Little difficult to tell from this video that it's a little hard to tell if this is a Starlink version 1.5 satellite or if this is a V2 mini. The orientation on this is not the clearest, and SpaceX did not elaborate which of its Starlink satellites this happened to be. But a really nifty view of the eclipse that happened on Monday. Go ahead and pop in the chat if you haven't already and let us know what your eclipse viewing experience is like, whether you were able to make it to the path of totality or if you were like those of us in Florida who were in the penumbra and just saw a partial eclipse. One other noteworthy thing is you see, obviously, the eclipse shadow is sort of the thing that takes your attention away. But if you look actually at the Starlink satellite itself and that solar array that's visible at the bottom of your screen, you can actually see it adjusting over the course of the video to angle as completely as possible towards the sun. So there's a little nifty piece of engineering on display with the Starlink satellite and how it actually operates on orbit. one of our channel members, Stephanie B, also moderator for us here, thinking that this is probably a Starlink V2 Mini, and now seeing it on loop a number more times, it seems like that is probably likely given the orientation of that solar array, given that the version 1.5 satellites were more perpendicular to the flat body of the main part of the spacecraft. I think if we had a more of a third person perspective on this, we would see the other solar array sticking out opposite of the one we see here on the screen. And speaking of Stephanie B, want to go ahead and take a moment to thank her and Astro Jen for helping out with moderation duties here in the live chat tonight. Really appreciate the two of you being with us. Keep our eye out for Astro Joe are in the chat with us this evening. Hello to the two of them. Let me see from Jen that Joe will be here shortly. Oh, that's lovely. Currently T minus 1 hour, 2 minutes, 58 seconds and counting. Since we do have a little bit of extra time that has been tacked on here, and I know it comes up often in the live chat, let's go ahead and talk about the trajectory for today's flight. We'll come back again as we get a little closer to the T0 when folks come on in. Chris Mars, they are counting down to a T0 liftoff at 1:16 a.m. Eastern, 05:16 UTC today. Of course, the Falcon 9 rocket is going to be lifting off from SpaceX's Workhorse pad here in Florida. That is Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. Same with all the other flights that are heading to the sixth shell of the Starlink constellation. This Falcon 9 rocket will be heading in a southeasterly trajectory. First stage booster after stage separation. It's going to be landing on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. It's got 2 here on the East Coast. The one on deck tonight is just read the instructions. The upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites following this process. You see they splash down under parachutes here, as you see in this image from a SpaceX presentation earlier this year. Company saves about $6 million per recovery. Tonight, SpaceX is using the recovery vessel Bob to scoop up the fairing halves of this Starlink 6-48 flight. Doug was hard at work supporting not only the Starlink 6-47 launch, but also another flight that lifted off from Pad 39A. That was the Bandwagon 1 mission, the first SpaceX rideshare flight heading to a mid-inclination orbit with 11 satellites on board. Here's an image here of what that recovery process looks like. A lovely sunset from last year. Bring in a 13 time flown fairing half on board one of the recovery vessels. Of course, the two here on the East Coast, Bob and Doug, named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. The pair that flew aboard the Demo 2 mission back in May of 2020, kicking off the commercial crew program into high gear with the first human flight. We are now again less than an hour, assuming the launch time does not shift out from under us again. We're currently at T minus 59 minutes, 43 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of the Starlink 6-48 mission. We're currently T minus 57 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. Assuming the T0 continues to move on as it currently stands, let's go ahead and look at the countdown timeline and what we are expecting as we head in through the remainder of the countdown this evening. Of course, things will get going at the T minus 38-minute mark, a little less than 20 minutes from now, if things remain on track. If the go-ahead is given for the start of prop load, that will begin at T minus 35 minutes with RP1 or rocket grade kerosene being loaded onto both the first and the second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9 first stage. T-minus 16 minutes. Lock load starts in the Falcon 9's second stage. But before that, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back as the feed lines are chilled at the pad. A big vent coming up right about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds or thereabouts. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps and protects the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. The strong back, or the transporter erector, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, just a slight lean back. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 2 minutes before liftoff, LOX load should be complete. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director gives their go for liftoff at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite and are healthy, flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for T0 liftoff, which, again, currently, double checking, still is at 1:16 p.m. Eastern, 05:16 UTC, or T-minus 54 minutes and 30 seconds. As of the most recent launch with the Bandwagon 1 mission, this is a look at the bar chart for SpaceX Falcon flights on the year so far. You see they've notched 35 to date. This would be launch number 36 whenever it's ready to go. Been a notable day for SpaceX and the Starlink program in particular. For those that follow spaceflight with much intent, which I'm guessing is a number of you, for those that are here watching a launch at midnight here on the East Coast, did have some news from company Vast, which is working on building a commercial space station. The first of which, called Haven 1, will be launched aboard a future Falcon 9 rocket launch, expected to lift off in 2025 on a single flight. It'll be serviced by Dragon missions to that commercial space station. Earlier today, or I guess yesterday now, technically, we got the news that Vast is going to be supported by Starlink internet service on station, and describes it as the first commercial space station that will feature Starlink internet on board. And not only will Starlink service be provided to this vast commercial space station, it also signed an agreement with SpaceX to help service its future commercial space station platforms as it bids for contracts with NASA to fly its astronauts to its commercial space station as a destination once the International Space Station is in the history books. Of course, the nominal end of the ISS is around 2030, but a lot has to happen before then. Not least of which is creating essentially an orbital tug that will help safely deorbit the ISS and allow it to break up in a responsible way. There's, of course, also the matter of having commercial destinations for NASA's astronauts and its international partners to head to, Vast hoping to be among them. You also have bids from companies like Voyager Space and its partners, as well as Axiom Space. T-minus 51 minutes, 16 seconds and counting to this Starlink mission lifting off tonight. Now T-minus 48 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. Just about 10 minutes away from the SpaceX launch director making a call on the start of prop load tonight, assuming that they are still targeting that T0 liftoff at 1:16, which as of this moment in time, it still appears that they are. Certainly appreciate the roughly 3,000 of you or 3,300 of you that are joining us live this evening or this morning, wherever you may be. If you haven't already, we'd love it if you could hit the like button for us. Helps more folks to find their way to this live launch coverage as we continue to roll merrily along. Also want to thank Silver Ghost for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Silver Ghost. Really appreciate you supporting us at that level. Silver Ghost says, thanks so much for always providing great coverage. It is much appreciated. And we certainly appreciate you in supporting the coverage. We are more than happy to do so. T-minus 47 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. Mentioned some of the Starlink news as far as VAST is concerned. SpaceX did have its own Starlink news as far as the expansion of coverage around the globe. While it may be a little bit difficult to tell in this coverage map because it is not the geographically largest country that you can possibly tack on here, but Albania has joined in the number of countries that now has Starlink internet access available to it.
Nadie podría haber pasado por alto nuestro rastro.
That latest edition announced just yesterday.
Nos esperaban al otro lado del planeta.
¿Cuál es la situación?
Estamos eliminando su escuadra de reconocimiento, nada grave. Pero se aproximan varios grupos de combate de clase CCS.
This is a look at
3
the
naves
Starlink
insignia por grupo.
satellites.
Y
as they
estarán aquí
are
dentro de
in
unos
their
90
launch
segundos.
configuration. This stack
Bien,
from
pues ya
a
está.
previous
Pon la
Starlink
nave en
flight.
alerta de combate,
There
Alpha.
are
Todos
23
a sus
of
puestos.
these satellites on
Todos,
board
señor.
this particular
Todos.
mission, Starlink 6-48. This will be
Por
the
cierto,
24th launch of the V2 Mini design this year.
Demos la
Each of them
bienvenida a
clocking in at
nuestros
about
amigos.
Ya he empezado.
1,760 pounds. It's about 800 kilograms. As we saw with the Eclipse video, they do have solar panels on either side of the main body, and it's unfurl with a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use Argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvers, as opposed to the previously used Krypton Hall thrusters. They're built in Redmond, Washington, which is nearest to Seattle. They'll be deployed at 200 miles or roughly 120 kilometers in altitude at a 43-degree inclination.
Ya lo habéis oído. ¡Ya os estáis moviendo!
Esto no es una instrucción, repito, no es una instrucción.
Chicos, mirad al frente, dedo en gatillo
While
y
the
todos
video that
volveremos
we
a
saw
casa de una
earlier
pieza.
of the Eclipse
¿Sí o no,
gave us
marines?
a bit of an idea of what Starlink V2
Claro
Mini
que
looks
sí.
like
Ahora
on
fuera,
orbit,
ya mismo.
at least
A todo
seeing
el
part of
personal,
the body.
volvemos a
Here's
atacar al enemigo. Contacto
a bit
externo e
more
interno inminente.
context, if you will. See
Los
both the
novatos que
solar
queríais ver de
panels
cerca.
extended from
¡Pacto!
the main body of the
Hoy
satellite.
estáis de
This
suerte.
image coming to us from HEO Robotics, which was able to snap a picture from one of its satellites, looking at a Starlink V2
Bien.
Mini on orbit captured
Ya,
last
vamos
year.
a descongelarle. Bien. Sistemas de bajo nivel en línea. Abrimos dentro de 30 segundos. Está caliente. 5 segundos para abrir. Su tubo está en verde. Ciclo completo.
Just for some immediate reference, here is that video again of the
Sentimos las
Eclipse
prisas,
as
jefe
captured by a
maestro.
Starlink, what we
Estamos un
believe
poco
is
liados.
Starlink V2
La
Mini
desorientación
satellite.
pasará enseguida.
Bienvenidos,
You can
señor.
see one of
Enseguida le
those solar
tendremos
panels
preparado.
extended out from the main
Jefe,
body
eche
of
un
the
vistazo por la
satellite
sala.
as the
Tengo que
Eclipse
calibrar el
passes
diagnóstico de su
at
traje
the
de
top of the
campaña.
screen here.
Bien, gracias, señor.
You can see that solar
Estoy ajustando
panel
sus monitores de
tilting
energía,
to try to
señor.
capture as much of the sun as possible.
Constantes vitales normales, no hay quemaduras. Muy bien, señor, ya puede salir del criotubo.
We're now at T-minus
Le he dado una
43
dosis doble
minutes,
de estimulante.
24 seconds
De
and
una vuelta
counting.
por la sala criogénica y reúnase
A little
conmigo
less
en el
than
puesto de
5.5
diagnóstico
minutes
óptico
away
cuando
from
esté
the
listo.
point at which we're expecting the launch director to make a call on the start of prop load tonight. So far, all
Colóquese sobre el
indications
cuadro rojo.
continue to suggest that we are still tracking a T0 liftoff at 1:16 a.m. Eastern, 0516 UTC.
Ya sé que los técnicos de armamento suelen ocuparse de los sensores de objetivo, pero vamos mal de tiempo, jefe. Mire los paneles intermitentes
always,
para
we will let
fijarlos
you
como
know
objetivos. Cuando los
should
fije
that
cambiarán de
change.
color. Vale, muy bien.
Señor, recibo algunos errores de calibración. Voy a invertir el ángulo de visión a ver si le parece mejor. Fije las luces intermitentes como objetivo. ¿Está mejor así o lo vuelvo a cambiar? Vale, vuelva a mirar arriba y abajo. ¿Lo dejo así o lo vuelvo a cambiar? Vale, dejaré el ángulo de visión normal, pero si quiere lo puede cambiar más adelante. Apunto para las pruebas de escudos de energía.
Sígame hasta el puesto de pruebas para escudos de energía.
Equipos de combate Alfa a Sierra a sus posiciones de defensa. Nave de abordaje del pacto aproximándose. Prepárense para hacer frente a los intrusos.
Vale, ajuste sus escudos de energía.
Muy bien, escudos totalmente cargados.
Bien, señor, bájelos para probar la recarga automática.
Se recargan normalmente. Todos los indicadores en verde.
Puente a Crío 2, aquí el Capitán Case. Envíen al jefe maestre al puente inmediatamente.
Capitán, tendremos que saltarnos el diagnóstico de armas y...
Ahora mismo, soldado.
A la orden, señor.
Riquísimo y rojísimo con tomatísimo. El intenso color y sabor del tomate con ingredientes de origen natural en todos tus platillos, como sopa de pasta, picadillo, arroz rojo y más. Riquísimo con tomatísimo. 2 cubos por solo 5 pesos.
El capitán parece nervioso. Mejor que vayamos para allá. Ya le buscaremos armas luego.
Vale, pero voy a dejar el autodiagnóstico funcionando.
Buena idea. Mejor que vayas a tu grupo de evacuación, Sam.
Afirmativo. Solo tengo que reiniciar el ordenador y me largo. ¡Oh, Dios! ¡Intentan atravesar la puerta! ¡Seguridad! ¡Intrusos en críos! ¡Por favor!
Sam. Sam. Vamos, tenemos que largarnos de aquí. ¡Por aquí!
We are now T-minus 39 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. About a minute and a half away from that call on the start of Croplow. Taking a look back at our live chat, I want to thank Brian M. Pullman, PhD, for a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate that. Brian says, thank you for your tireless dedication, continuous improvements, and providing exceptional coverage. Your commitment to excellence is greatly appreciated. That's very kind of you to say, Brian. It certainly takes a village behind the scenes to make these live streams go as they do, and we certainly appreciate you noticing the hard work it takes to make this possible. So pass along the kudos to the full team here. Really appreciate that.
Jefe maestro, aquí la situación está controlada. Seguro que le necesitan en otra parte.
¿Dónde se han metido? Jefe, Cortana dice que vaya al puente ahora
Also
mismo.
want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, Nelson Reyes. First of all, good to see you again this evening, sir, and thanks for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that bit of generosity here. And to our 5 newest channel members, first off, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to thank Nelson in the live chat. And we hope you appreciate your time as channel members and stick around with us.
Capitán Case. Me alegro de verle, jefe. La cosa no va bien. Cortana hizo lo que pudo, pero todo fue inútil.
Una docena de naves del Pacto contra un solo crucero de clase Alción. Me conformo con 3. Más bien 4 blancos. ¿Has dormido bien?
Sí, pero no gracias a ti.
¿Me has echado de menos?
Informe.
Ha sido uno de sus grupos de abordaje, una carga de antimateria.
Señora, el cañón principal está desconectado.
Capitán, esa era mi última opción ofensiva.
Está bien, voy a iniciar el protocolo Code, artículo 2. Abandonamos el auto. Tú también, Cortana.
¿Y usted que va a hundirse con la nave?
Eso podríamos decir. Ese objeto que hay ahí, voy a intentar aterrizar en él.
Con el debido respeto, señor. Ya hay bastantes héroes muertos.
Entiendo tu preocupación, Cortana, pero no
So
depende
while
de
we
mí.
have the
El
time,
protocolo
let's
está
go ahead
claro.
and talk
Una
about
inteligencia
the
artificial no
vehicle
puede ser
that is the
destruida ni
workhorse
capturada.
for
Por eso te
SpaceX,
vas
the
de la
Falcon
nave.
9, which stands
Fija una
at
serie de
70
zonas de
meters or
aterrizaje.
229
Cárgalas
feet
en mi
tall,
red neural
diameter
y
of
prepárate para una
3.6 meters
transferencia.
or 12 feet.
Sí, señor.
Y aquí interviene usted, jefe. Saque a Cortana de la nave. Manténgala a salvo del enemigo. Si la capturan, lo sabrán todo. Despliegue de fuerzas, armas...
A new T0, so stand by as we adjust our countdown clock.
El Autumn seguirá maniobrando hasta que inicie una secuencia de aterrizaje. No me va a hacer caso, pero deje que mis subrutinas se ocupen de la aproximación final.
Excelente trabajo, Cortana. Gracias. ¿Estás lista?
Venga.
We're now looking at a new T0 of 1:40 a.m.
Buena suerte, jefe.
Which means we are now back to T-minus 59 minutes, 51 seconds and counting.
Tu arquitectura
and as always, we will let you know if there are any further adjustments.
No está cargada, hijo.
We will come back to talk about the Falcon 9 in just a moment. We're just going to go ahead and let some folks who are not actively with us here on the live stream know about the new T0, and we'll be back with you in just a moment.
Esos marines necesitan ayuda, jefe. Haz todo lo que puedas.
¡Toma ya! ¡Me han dado! ¡Vamos allá!
¿Alguien lo ve?
¡Quítame en medio! ¡Disparad! ¡No te los quedes todos!
¡Cuidado! Podría estar en cualquier parte. Todo tranquilo.
¡Está por todas partes!
Vamos a buscarlos.
En este lado no hay nadie.
Equipos de combate en cubierta 7 y 8, a la segunda posición defensiva.
¿Qué pasa? ¿Nos ha alcanzado algo?
¡Vamos! ¡Volved a la esclusa! Sabía que...
¿Qué?
¡Sigue así! ¡Ah! ¡Me han dado! ¡Ese era mío!
¡Perdimos a uno!
¿Cómo quema? ¿Lo ves? No veo nada.
¡Abajo!
No te escaparás.
¡Voy tras ellos! Yo te cubro.
¡Sálvate!
¿Dónde se han metido?
¡Escapa!
¿Lo ves?
Voy a entrar. ¡Vamos!
Equipos de combate de reserva en cubierta 5 a 9, a la segunda posición defensiva.
caballería!
Encontraré a ese cerdo.
¡Cubridme!
Voy detrás.
Yo lo vi primero.
¡Disparad! Le he dado.
Tripulación y personal de operaciones encubiertas 1 a 4. Preséntense de inmediato en los puestos de evacuación.
¡Tienen élite! ¡Uy! ¡Más enemigo!
¡Disparad!
¡Pacto! En el embarcadero encima de nosotros.
¡Fuego! Sigue así.
¡Qué susto! ¡No te escaparás!
¡Cubridme! Estoy en...
Tripulación y personal de operaciones encubiertas 9 a 12. A los puestos de evacuación, ya.
¡Disparad! ¡Toma plomo! ¿Qué te parece? Yo lo vi primero. No pueden ser solo esos. Como en el entreno. ¡Dios! ¡Los he encontrado! ¡Fuego!
¡Socorro!
No te molestes en levantarte.
Al resto de la tripulación y personal de operaciones, a las lanchas salvavidas. Retírense a los puestos de evacuación.
¡Aquí! Oh, ¿quieres que te dispare un poco más?
A toda la tripulación, aquí el capitán. Prepárense para abandonar la nave. Equipos de combate, hagan frente a los intrusos hasta que el personal se haya ido. Buena suerte, Case, corto.
Las cápsulas de salvamento están despegando, hay que darse prisa. Alarma, con puertas cerrándose. Tenemos que usar los accesos de mantenimiento de la nave. Sigue el punto de navegación, te llevará a una salida. Detecto movimiento del pacto fuera de los accesos. Activando rastreador de movimiento. Busquemos una salida segura. Estamos demasiado cerca, hay que buscar otra ruta. Todo despejado en el rastreador de movimiento. Espera, tenemos que pasar por esa puerta, pero está dañada por una explosión.
Equipos de combate Alfa a noviembre, a los puestos de evacuación más cercanos.
Parece que el pacto quería pillarte desprevenido.
Equipos de combate Sierra Víctor, prepárense para evacuación.
And we're back with you. T-minus 48 minutes, 33 seconds, and counting. Thanks so much for your patience. Returning to our rundown of the Falcon 9 rocket here. Most of this 229-foot-tall vehicle is made up by the first stage, about 2/3 of the rocket. This particular first stage, tail number 1083 in the SpaceX fleet, has only flown one time before. That was for the launch of the Crew Dragon Endeavour, supporting the quartet that made up the Crew 8 mission heading up to the International Space Station. That launched back beginning of March of this year. Currently on orbit for the next 6 months. Or about 5 months now at this point. They'll actually be getting back into their Crew Dragon in the not too distant future. Part of the rotation that will allow for the next human mission to the ISS coming up in less than a month. That being the crew flight test of Boeing Starliner spacecraft. Before Starliner is able to launch atop a ULA Atlas V rocket, a couple things need to happen first. Next item up in the schedule will be the detachment of the Cargo Dragon spacecraft that is at the Zenith port, the space-facing port of the ISS, the Harmony module. And that'll return back to Earth for splashdown up the coast of Florida sometime near the end of this month. That'll be followed by a relocation of the Crew Dragon Endeavour to the SpaceX Crew 8. Astronauts and cosmonaut will get back into their flight suits, board that Dragon, and then move it over from the forward port to the Zenith port, and that'll create an opening for the Starliner spacecraft to dock for a mission that'll last around 8 days or so. Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams will have quite a bit to do to shake out the vehicle. Normally it will do much of its operations using autonomous functions on the Starliner spacecraft, but because this is a flight test, they will be taking manual control of the stick during multiple parts of the mission to test out some off-nominal scenarios and make sure the vehicle operates to the full extent that they expect it to. That mission is set to launch no earlier than May 6th. Coming back to the Falcon 9 rocket. Went off on a little side tangent there, but that's just a couple of items coming up here. See the base of the Falcon 9 first stage, the name coming from those 9 Merlin 1D engines. The base of the Falcon 9 rocket, which burn a combination of rocket-grade kerosene, or RP-1, and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Around the engine compartment, you can see the black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, SpaceX is using the drone ship. Just read the instructions tonight.
Solo queda una lancha salvavidas. Rápido, sube a bordo antes de que despegue.
Oh no, oh no.
Canaveral at the moment, along with the recovery vessel Doug.
Convendría que nos fuéramos ya.
Dale.
Sí, señor.
Above the first stage is the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber.
¿verdad, señor? No
In the
quiero
image on the
morir aquí.
right-hand side of your screen, you can see those deployable hypersonic grid fins. These titanium winglets provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards that drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. The first stage main engine cutoff high-pressure helium is used to release those latches before pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket, powered by a single modified Merlin engine, which is called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine.
¿Seguro que no quieres
It's equipped
sentarte?
with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burning to the vacuum of space, hence the name.
Si aún
Comes in
tuviera dedos, los cruzaría.
longer or shorter length varieties depending on the performance needs of the mission. If SpaceX is able to get away with a shorter engine nozzle, that's of course cheaper if they don't need the maximum performance of the Falcon 9 upper stage. Remember, the vacuum engine can produce more than 200,000 pounds of thrust. It'll be fired twice on today's flight to place the 23 Starlinks into their intended orbit. The MVAC engine, same as the first stage, burns the propellant mix of RP-1 and LOX, and it will ignite a third time after the deployment of the Starlink satellites for a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back to the atmosphere, where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of any unnecessary space debris during this mission. And of course, at the very top of the rocket are the payload fairings, which are encapsulating the 23 Starlink satellites on this flight. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material. They stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, and they are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. The two halves will be recovered by the recovery vessel Bob tonight, a little bit downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. They gently splash down into parachutes like we showed you a little bit earlier. And once scooped up, Bob will bring them back to Port Canaveral, where they'll be offloaded, checked out, and refurbished, cleared for future flights. We're now T-minus 41 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Just a few minutes away, hopefully, from when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the startup propellant load tonight. We can get this show a moving. Our T-minus 40 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank one of our channel members, Valerie Jones, for a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Valerie. Really appreciate that. Valerie quips, although not inaccurately. Did you miss a SpaceX launch? Wait a minute. There'll be another. Almost like rain in the Midwest. Wait long enough and you'll catch the next rainstorm. Basically the same with the Falcon 9 rockets these days. As I mentioned, this will be SpaceX's 24th Starlink flight on the year. And this is their 36th launch so far in 2024 overall. Like last year, though, where we were treated to 5 launches of the Falcon Heavy rocket, there will be just 2 Falcon Heavy flights this year. The first set to come up no earlier than June 25th, supporting the launch of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA's GOES-U satellite. Again, set to launch no earlier than June 25th. That'll be followed a number of months later in October by the launch of NASA's Europa Clipper spacecraft, which will begin a voyage out to Jupiter's moon, Europa. We may have another Falcon Heavy launch to potentially add to the calendar in a few years from now. During Space Symposium over in Colorado, they announced, or I guess during the week of Space Symposium, it was unclear if this was not specifically at Space Symposium, but the ExoMars mission, which originally was going to be a partnership with Russia and Roscosmos, but due to their invasion of Ukraine and that ongoing war, the European Space Agency has had to pivot their plans and now say they will be launching from the Kennedy Space Center in 2028. While they did not specify a launch vehicle, I think they're pretty decent odds that it very well could be a Falcon Heavy rocket supporting that launch. But we'll wait and see, and of course we'll report more information as we have it. Now T-minus 37 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Here before on this mission, so I will do that with just a hint of trepidation in my voice as we are double checking to see if there are going to be any additional adjustments to that T0 yet again. But assuming this is T0 time that SpaceX is targeting, we are now less than 2 minutes away from the start of propellant load. So now is the time to watch and pay attention to any additional changes in the T0. And SpaceX does have the latitude to continue shifting its launch time as long as fueling has not started. And the launch window does extend all the way out to 3:30 a.m. Eastern this morning. We'll stand by for additional information over the next couple of minutes and let you know if we catch word that fueling has in fact begun. currently at T-minus 35 minutes and counting. Assuming that is still in line with the SpaceX launch plans tonight. SpaceX launch team should have started propellant load right about now. Standing by for word from SpaceX to see if they have in fact begun fueling today. Now T-minus 33 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. What we're looking for at this point, since SpaceX is not providing mission audio ahead of the final 5 minutes of the count, if you take a look at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, you see the crew access tower to the right of the vehicle, those white lights up the right-hand side. From our vantage point here, you go up about 1, 2, 3, and then turn your eyes to the Falcon 9 rocket. It's right about there where we usually see a frost ring and some vapor forming as the super cold densified liquid oxygen is loaded on board the vehicle. Because the little heat distortion this evening and the lightness in color of the vehicle, given that it has only flown once before, it's going to be a little hard to distinguish as we are in the early part of fueling, but hopefully it'll become a little bit more pronounced as we continue on through the fueling process, assuming that it has in fact begun. Yes, we are now seeing vapor in that area I was just describing. So fortunately, we are now in the fueling process at T-minus 31 minutes, 38 seconds and counting, which means SpaceX is committing to a launch attempt here at almost lost track of the time, 1:40 a.m. Eastern, 5:40 UTC. For whatever reason, SpaceX needs to stand down from this launch attempt. They do have a backup window tomorrow morning starting at 12:18 a.m. Eastern, but they are appearing to give it a go tonight, which is certainly welcome news. And so with that, now that we are more firmly in motion with this launch tonight of the Starlink 6-48 mission, I want to thank you all for your patience and hanging with us here. To the 3,800 of you, if we could help some more folks find their way in by hitting the like button, that would, of course, be very much appreciated. At this point in the next 30 seconds or so, at the T-minus 30-minute mark, SpaceX will start loading cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels of the first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. That process will begin on the Falcon 9 second stage at about the T-minus 25-minute mark. 26 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. As fueling continues on the Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and take a look back at the remaining fueling milestones that are still outstanding on this Falcon flight tonight. Coming up next will be the so-called big vent as the feed lines are chilled at the launch pad prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. That big vent should come about around T-minus 20 minutes, 20 seconds or so. LOX load begins at T-minus 16 minutes. In T-minus 7 minutes, teams will begin the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, protecting them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be fully loaded. T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. Starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector or the strong back will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes out, LOX load on the Falcon 9 first stage wraps up. Then 2 minutes before liftoff, the vehicle is fully loaded once liquid oxygen load on the second stage concludes. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The launch director gives their go for liftoff 45 seconds out. Engine ignition command comes in at T-minus 3 seconds. And then if all 9 Merlin 1D engines are healthy and ignite, flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release the bird for a teaser liftoff coming up at 1:40 a.m. Eastern, 05:40 UTC, or in T-minus 24 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. Currently T-minus 21 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. Just a little over a minute away from the start of the big event here. As we do have additional confirmation from what we are seeing here on the screen, that payload, that propellant load, excuse me, is in fact underway according to SpaceX. We see here that from the venting. They also confirmed that Falcon 9 is healthy and that weather is currently go for launch, which is encouraging for liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket just a little over 21 minutes from now. Look at the live chat here. I want to thank one of our channel members, Norman Reitzel, for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Norman. Good to see you this evening. In his comment, makes a request for units in metric as opposed to the imperial system. Things like pounds. We do toggle back and forth between the two as we communicate with the audience based here in the States, which is more accustomed to hearing units in the imperial system as opposed to metric. So try to be cognizant of both. And we do use both, although granted, not for everything all the time. And so try to be cognizant of that in the future as we are communicating with a global audience here. I want to make sure that everyone is fully understanding. We're now T-minus 19 minutes, 58 seconds and counting. You see the big vent now in motion. T-minus 17 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. A little less than a minute left on the big event prior to second stage LOX load. So far, now that fueling is underway, things are moving smoothly with the countdown ahead of the launch of the Starlink 6-48 mission. As the big event wraps up, also want to thank Diana04 for a 10 peso super chat. Really appreciate that, Diana. And also appreciate the 4,600 of you who are joining us for our live launch coverage in the early morning hours here on the East Coast. If you haven't already, as we come into the final 16 minutes, be a big help if you hit the like button, allow some more folks to find our live coverage this evening. Very much appreciated. Now T-minus 14 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. Big Vet wrapped up. Second stage LOX load now underway. Coming up next will be the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, thermally conditioning them to protect them ahead of ignition. Speaking of ignition, if you were not here with us earlier in the broadcast where we gave you a glimpse back at the final flight of the Delta IV Heavy rocket for United Launch Alliance, it was a big moment for ULA as they concluded nearly 300 flights of the Delta family of rockets over a period of more than 6 decades. The President CEO Tory Bruno has described the new Vulcan rocket, which will be the standard bearer for the company moving forward with eventually all of its missions. He's called it essentially an Atlas 6 kind of a rocket that will take over the responsibilities of both the Delta IV Heavy and the Atlas V vehicle eventually once the Atlas V runs its course. For now, since we were party to the final flight, the 16th and final flight of the Delta IV Heavy, if you weren't with us for our live launch coverage then, or with us earlier in this broadcast for our look back at our launch replay, let's go ahead and take a look at that one more time before we see this Falcon 9 rocket fly. This is a look back at the final launch of the Delta IV Heavy on the NROL-70 mission for the National Reconnaissance Office. We are now T-minus 10 minutes, 30 seconds and counting to the liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket here. Fueling continues to move along well. Want to thank one of our channel members, Josh King, for being channel member at the Path Leader level for now 18 months. Really appreciate you being with us all that time, Josh. Always good to see you. Noting it's been quite a journey. Yes, it's amazing what happens over the span of 18 months, nearly 2 years. Quite a long time. We appreciate you being with us for that period. Look forward to the next 18 months. Speaking of looking forward to the next 9 minutes and some change before we can see this Falcon fly. Look ahead at the timeline for what will happen after liftoff and the milestones that we can expect. Following that point, coming up in T-minus 9 minutes and 30 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 rocket will pass through max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, at T plus 1 minute and 12 seconds. That'll be followed by a few different events in fairly rapid succession. First will be first stage mid-engine cutoff, or MECO, at T plus 2 minutes 31 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation at T plus 2 minutes 34 seconds. And then second stage engine start, or SES1, at T plus 2 minutes and 41 seconds. After that, the payload fairings will be jettisoned just a little after 3 minutes into flight, followed by the first stage entry burn ignition. That burn lasting 21 seconds, beginning at about T plus 6 minutes and 15 seconds. We'll set up for the first stage landing burn ignition coming up at T plus 7 minutes 57 seconds. And the first stage booster, tail number 1083 in the SpaceX fleet, should touch down on the drone ship, just read the instructions, at about T plus 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Then Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will cease firing at about 8 3/4 minutes into the flight. The upper stage will then go into a parking orbit and continue on in that coast phase until T plus 54 minutes, 16 seconds. There'll be a brief 2-second burn, setting up Starlink satellite deployment at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 25 seconds. Just about 30 seconds or so away from the chill down sequence for the 9 Merlin 1D engines. You can hear some birds chattering in the background. Also impatiently waiting for this Falcon 9 rocket to launch as well, I'm sure. We're now T-minus 5 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. I want to thank channel member Josh King for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Josh. Really appreciate that. Coming in with a Starliner question asking, once Starliner does launch, how long will it take to reach the ISS? Depends on the day, but currently they're targeting liftoff on the 6th. That'll be at 10:34 p.m. Eastern, 0234 UTC. That'll set up a docking on May 8th. If for some reason, though, Starliner does slip beyond that, we will have to update you with new arrival time. Coming into the strong back retract sequence in the next several seconds here.
They're pressing for a strong back retract.
As you hear that call out now from SpaceX. Again, the process will begin with the clamp arms opening up and the transporter erector reclining away about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff. And a good morning to you, Smooth Juice, coming in with a 5-pound super chat. Really appreciate that support.
Strong back retract has started.
I hear that call out. See the clamp arms opening up just beneath the payload fairings there. Just a little over 3 minutes away now from planned liftoff. Should be wrapping up LOX load on the Falcon 9 first stage momentarily.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
There you hear that call out. The last of the fueling milestones we're waiting on now is stage 2 LOX load wrapping up. That point will conclude fueling on this Falcon 9 ahead of its liftoff. Want to quickly thank channel member Nelson Reyes for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Nelson. Who says, thank you, Will, and the Spaceflight Now crew. Thanks to Gary Haynes for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Gary. If you're one of our new channel members, be sure to thank Gary in the live chat. And enjoy watching this and all of our Cape-based launches in 4K. Less than 2 minutes to flight now. Thanks also to G-Dog for a $5 super chat.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
Sending greetings from Maine. And with that call for stage 2 LOX load complete, the Falcon 9 now fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. The venting you're seeing here are the ground gas closeouts ahead of liftoff coming up just a little over a minute from now.
Ground gas closeouts.
We're now less than a minute from planned liftoff. Should be hearing the SpaceX launch director make their call that they are go for launch
Falcon
in the next
9 is in startup.
several seconds.
go for launch.
And there you have it. We are go for launch. 30 seconds coming up. Seconds. Here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-48 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. A beautiful ascent of a Falcon 9 rocket, kicking off our Wednesday morning. About 30 seconds into flight. Now a little over a minute into this mission. Falcon 9 now supersonic, traveling faster than the speed of sound. Passing through max Q shortly. There's a call for max Q, point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Coming up next will be those events in fairly rapid succession in the next minute or so. First will be first stage main engine cutoff for MECO, T plus 2 minutes 31 seconds, followed a few seconds thereafter by stage separation. Then second stage engine start, SES-1, and then fairing deployment a little after 3 minutes to flight. That call you just heard from SpaceX, they are thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine, preparing for its ignition. Now a little over 2 minutes into flight. And some beautiful tracking this evening. Cruising in between the clouds, you're seeing some views from our friend Pete Carson's right now from Max Q Productions. Coming up on MECO in the next about 5 seconds. There you see MECO, stage separation. And SES-1. Nice view of Florida. And the Falcon 9 second stage there just before that engine ignition. Payload fairings should be jettisoning right now. And there you see them falling away in Pete Carson's view, reflecting the glow of the Merlin vacuum engine. And there you see that view on the SpaceX feed on the right-hand side of your screen. Those Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission. A little bit of a jellyfish effect here as the Falcon 9 upper stage continues to cruise by. See some stars in the distance. Coming up on the 4th minute into flight here. Now T plus 4 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Interesting that we're not getting views anymore of the Falcon 9 first stage from the onboard cameras that we're normally accustomed to seeing. It may just be a glitch with the camera system. Could just also be that the camera itself is obscured by darkness. A little bit hard to tell at this point. A little more than 5 minutes into flight now. In less than a minute, the first stage entry burn will begin. See the inside of the Falcon 9 first stage. Depending on the cloud cover where Pete is, we may be able to catch part of the entry burn, given the cumulus clouds that have been hanging around and kind of smoked us a little bit for heavy launch. It may or may not be visible here, but big box right now. We're taking a look at the tracker view here of the press site. That is the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. If you see there on the onboard camera views. In 7 minutes into flight, we're less than a minute away from the start of the first stage landing burn beginning. Worth noting, you're seeing the views on both sides of the Falcon 9 upper stage, where you see that view toggle back and forth. SpaceX Vice President of Falcon Launch Vehicles, John Edwards, explained what that process is. In a response to a question on X from last month, he noted that they're trying to keep an eye on both sides of the engine, quote, in case any issues develop in flight, such as nozzle streaking, which are hot or cold spots that are caused by non-uniform turbine exhaust distribution. So if you're ever curious why they toggle the views back and forth, that is why.
Stage 1 landing burn.
You see the landing burn now underway.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Views from the drone ship on the right-hand side of your screen momentarily.
Landing leg deploy.